it up to me to make sure I place my child in the right building. And that's why I have tried, I was talking to, Mr. Bell, I could kill you sometimes, anyhow. So, anyhow, but my youngest daughter, who if you think well, first I'm gonna brag, okay? I'll let you know exactly that I'm gonna stop bragging about her, okay? Because she has done so many things in her 23 plus years of life. She's presently working on her doctorate in nuclear engineering at the University of Michigan. But she was on the United States Acrobatic Gymnastics team. She's a third degree black belt. She'll be a fourth, but her schedule wouldn't allow her to do it. She speaks Russian, she speaks Spanish, and you know to hear her play the piano and the classic guitar. That's just some of the things she has done. But in her life, and we travel all over the world together, especially when she was in gymnastics. But I didn't even realize this, as talented and as she was and she is. One of the biggest things, and gymnastics, it's mostly white involved into it, but blacks are making tremendous inroads. Everybody knows Simone Biles. I don't have to say that. But she's in artistic gymnastics, and before all this incident that happened with USAG, my daughter was in acrobatics. They used to all meet outside Austin, Texas, 2 weeks a year. All the gymnastics came together who were members of the United States team because they wanted to know each other. But one of the things that my daughter was known for was me. People found it so unusual, and I didn't realize it until after a while. I enjoyed being with her. And one of the biggest pleasure I had in my life was just to be there. I was there when she first learned. When she was born, the doctor didn't hand her to my wife. She handed her to me. I was the first one to hold her besides the doctor. I was there when she first learned how to walk, when she first stood up walking, and I had the privilege to be there in many other crucial times in her life, and the same with my oldest daughter. But she has done one of the biggest things, just to be with your kids. I teach martial arts. I taught with Lawrence, I taught martial arts for 20 years, plus at John Eagle Howard. Before they tore it down at Dorothy Heights, what did they build at Dorothy Heights, right near Utah and North Avenue, at Dorothy Heights. The new school, the new big school they built there, with John Eagle Howard. And I always remember back in the early 2000s, about 2001, 2002, the director of the program, she told the kids to draw a mural of what they like. And first, my first reaction, I said, oh boy, it's gonna be a fun to stick man, out there. But the kids actually did a really good job, but it kind of surprised me because they drew murals of drive-by, drug dealing, and young ladies being pregnant, and I know I was and then I was talking to the kids there, and I asked her how many people in here know someone who died by a drive-by, and 90% of the little kids raised their hand, and I was kind of surprised about that. But one thing about me being a lawyer, being a judge, and I was able to bring other people in there. They saw people who are doing things, who are with them in the community, and I think that you mentioned it, and both of you mentioned it. They see people who are doing good things, who are part of the community, and you can stand as examples to them. Because the only examples many times they see are the negative ones. But when they see someone doing well, and besides it, when you teach martial arts, and I'm pretty good. Now, believe it or not, my daughter is better than me. And if she really wanted to, she probably could beat me. But she would never do it. At least I don't think so. So anyhow.
So to get back, I know there are a few steps that we need to do starting with the family, but just to jump to because I know you're a father, obviously. And there are a lot of fathers who want to be a part of the children's lives, but they have some issues with the mothers or, whatever, but what
I
can
do a lot of child custody cases.
So, right, so, and that's important. So that's what I was gonna ask, what can the judicial system do, and at that step, to help fathers get back into the homes? Because I know it is biased, the system is pretty biased.
Well, I represent an officer, and so many times you have to be, I represent a lot of police officers and different women, it's about even Stevens, so I've been on both sides, and I am on both sides of the coin. But if a woman makes an accusation against, he touched me, he hit me, that officer is suspended, his power is revoked, and everything else, so they are really careful in what they do. But on the same token, who's that crazy officer and they killed his stepson or son?
The
You
two
know what
children,
I'm
the
talking
two
It's in
about.
Baltimore County.
Yeah, and then that officer not too long ago, they were driving and, yeah, so it's a balance that you have to make, because you don't want not to do something, and then the person ends up being, and it can cut both ways, but the majority of cases is still guys against women, okay? And that woman ended up being killed or injured seriously. So if you don't grant a protective order, for instance, and it's abused, sometimes I had a case right now, the woman did grab the kid and then left the state, and of course the order was dropped. So the guy got suspended from his job in the interim, and that happens it's so much I can tell you.
Well, say there's no violence, say there's
Okay.
no violence in the situation, because a lot of times there aren't violence, as long as there's violence, but sometimes there aren't. And what can the system do to help put the kids back, or the fathers back in the home when there is conflict, but not necessarily violence?
Well, I'm gonna go to what he said, really, and the court has developed over the years, and meaning they have collateral programs to assist families. It was a time there was no programs out there, but they have responded with mental health issues. They have people to come in to give counseling, and of course, but you have to remember, when the courts get involved, it's usually because of violence, or at least the allegation, and I would say the allegation of violence, or, in divorce cases or custody cases, it may not be any violence, but they have parenting classes, because in a parenting class is not to teach the mother or father how to be, it may be 10% how to communicate with the kids, is to teach them how to communicate with each other. And so there are programs now, they need to do more of that type, and I think that's what you mentioned about the mental aspect of it. That needs to be addressed many times, but I could sit here for the next 2 hours and give you example, and it would just take too long.
Yeah.
On both sides, and again, my father used to always say, life is a balance to be. You have to balance, and you can't lean one way or you're gonna fall, or lean the other way, or you're gonna fall the other way. And that's what the court needs to do.
Mr. Bell, I'll say about in the 60s, the family structure was much stronger than first question, what do you think happened between then and now that prevented the divide that we have now? And what could we do to make it better?
That's an excellent question, and I think that you take a picture of young men back in the 1960s or 50s, and then take a picture of young black men today, it's totally different.
Yes.
Some people may be offended a little bit by this, but I think that the whole hip-hop phenomenon is more negative than it's positive. See, the reason I say is because it projects the black man as a teenager for life. I mean, nothing wrong with being 15, 16. If you're 15 to 16, right? But it began to be projected, this whole thing that a black man is walking on a certain way, and they always have a baseball cap on backwards and all this kind of stuff. When he's, not 16, but 26, 36, 56. And I think that what happened, well, in the 60s, I'm trying to be honest about this. I'm an advocate for social services. I'm an advocate for resources that we have not had. But I think that the way that it was done crippled us as a people. They developed a system, really started like in the late 50s into the 60s, where a woman, prior to that, if you got pregnant by a guy, you were kind of stuck, you know what I mean? And you were very careful. Right, okay, but by the 60s, you could get a welfare check with the man not being in the house. Okay, so you start a phenomenon where you have you don't want the man in the house. Matter of fact, if the man is in the house, you lose the money. That began the whole avalanche, snowball to where we are today. So, and then men start losing a lot of their standards because the sisters stopped having their standards for men. Brother could not be that raggedy back then, You had black men who maybe had one nickel in their pocket, could be broke as a joke, but they still carried themselves a certain way, right? And that began to change, I think, by the late 60s into 70s. That's one thing. I think that a lot of strong black male leadership you had in the 60s was it really reached a peak in the late 60s. A lot of strong black men got killed. That movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, about the brother who was
Black Panther.
In Chicago. You know what I'm talking about. Okay.
Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a meeting recently with his son, Fred Hampton Jr., talking about this. But you had really strong, progressive black leadership. And the government mowed it down. There was a documentary I saw once called Bastards of the Party on HBO, right? And it's really fascinating. You'll see that, but you'll look this up, okay? And it says that the Crips out in LA and Oakland originally were a positive group. The name stood for Community Revolutionary, I can't remember the whole name, okay? But they were an outgrowth of the Black Panther Party. They were supposed to be the baby Panthers. And the idea was you'd have black men who were grooming young black men into leadership. But when you had the strong black men getting wiped out in the late 60s into the 70s, the Crips, then the Bloods who came after them, had no leadership. So when you cut the head off, the body just goes into it. Now after that, by late 70s, really into the 80s, drugs got pumped in, right? No, let me back up. In the 70s, the job base in the cities went away. I always tell people, my grandfather, his name was Lawrence Bell, he came here in 1936 from Chester, South Carolina. He had almost no education at all, but got a good job working at Belham Steel. He met my grandmother up here. She didn't have the education. But in those days, black men, and men in general, could get good quality jobs in Baltimore, Detroit, look at New York, Philly, okay? They got good jobs, and the unemployment rate was very low, and they were making good money. When those jobs began to be moved out of the cities, really began like in the late 60s into the 70s, okay? Look at Baltimore. Baltimore, you don't have Belham Steel anymore. Out there on Boney Highway, you don't have the car manufacturing. So what happened is you had a whole generation of black men now who don't have jobs, which is the basis of being able to have a family. So they start dividing like that. So the system, if you will, giving a check to the sister when she has a baby, but they don't give anything to the man. He doesn't have a job to maintain his dignity. See, this is what happened in the 70s. By the early 80s, you had the crack epidemic. And many of you seen that the show on HBO.
The Wire?
The Wire. Okay, The Wire talks about that. There's a character in The Wire that's actually based on me, believe it or not. I can tell you who it is. But he's a good guy. And I heard that.
String a bell? String a bell? String a bell?
But he's a good guy, so I was like, okay, cool.
One of the drug dealers.
What happened was in the 70s, I'm not trying to be too long, I'm trying to, okay.
We're listening.
In the 70s, cocaine was considered to be the rich man's drug.
Yes, sir.
In the 80s, out in LA, somebody came up with this idea, you take some cocaine, mix it with some baking soda, right? And it goes crack, 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 pop, 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 and it created crack. Crack lowered the price of cocaine. It made it more accessible to everyday people. It's very addictive, inexpensive, but you gotta keep going back and get more and more and more, right? And so what happened in the 80s is that blew up. These gangs, which originally could have been something positive, became negative. The Crips got, and BGF here, you know, Black Guerrilla Family, all these groups centered around the sale of drugs. Also, because drugs are so, crack is so inexpensive, okay, along with the heroin, it took more people to sell the drugs to make the same amount of money. Hence, you had what we call open air drug markets, right? If you go back to the 60s, if somebody didn't want to get high, they want to get their drugs, they had to know somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody, right? To get it. There was a movie, Superfly, okay? I'm just throwing stuff in there, okay? Then you look to the day, okay? So by the 80s, you see all these people out here. I got elected at the end of the 80s. And I'm like, golly, why got these people out here on Pennsylvania Avenue? Like people out here, because before that, they didn't sell it out in the open. As you develop open air drug markets in the 80s, and more of the young black men got sucked into the drug trafficking, which became the new economy, you saw their moral fiber go down. People poison their own community for money. You know, and I would say to people, and I'm gonna shut up in a minute, I'm just trying to put it all together. They think they're hard, they're bad, and you know, they the mafia and all this kind of stuff. The Italians look at us like we're fools. They look down on us. I used to tell them, I said, you know, I'll tell you one thing, the Italians don't destroy their own neighborhood, right? They don't go drive-by shooting at a corner with 10 people out there, that kind of thing. So that kind of wild, crazy behavior in the 80s began to develop into the 90s. And what we have today is really just a mess, because we got a whole generation of young black men who are now used to seeing a lot of their fathers not be employed. So that's already corrupted their mentality. Then another thing you see, and I say when I came in late 80s into the 90s, is that black men started dropping out of leadership. That's another thing, right? I go to these neighborhood community meetings. I was a young councilman. I was a boy wonder. I'm like, damn, I'm the only guy here. You know what I mean? You see a few older guys, but black men stopped being leaders. And then the media started promoting that as being a good thing. Okay? I think today you see the media pushing black men as being all body but no brain. I'll say also they're pushing black men as being effeminate, not being masculine anymore. Can I get a witness about that?
Amen.
But see, understand this. Who's the one that's promoting it? Who's the one that's financing it? And it's not just, you know, we're often concerned with the right wing, you know, the conservative right wing racists. And there's a lot of them out there, right? But one of the things that Malcolm X told us is look also at some of the liberals, you know?
Yeah, he said, yeah.
Am I right?
Yes, yes he did.
Because right now, the money that's coming in here from COVID is coming from our liberal friends.
That's correct.
Ones
But
that
I
say they
don't
love
see
us.
any plan of empowering the people. They give you a few dollars, you know, you got some dollars for welfare, you got some dollars for this little program, that little program. School supplies, okay? You look at Freddie Gray, a lot of money came in Baltimore. It had no impact at all.
None.
So the problem is, and I'm gonna set up at this, is that we are lacking we don't have ownership. We don't own anything. We don't own the houses we live in. We don't own the businesses that are in the neighborhood. So we're always begging, right? And I'm saying we need to vote, but we gotta have an economic base. And we gotta start encouraging brothers to step up and be leaders. And that's the other part of it.
You do have, and I'm glad you mentioned everything you said, but you do have good organization. You had good height around here. They're doing a lot. You got Reverend Hathaway, and you probably know at Union Memorial and things that he is involved into rebuilding this neighborhood. So you have a lot of good people that are trying to do things, but again, people need people. And I would just say, you talked about Malcolm X. Malcolm X and my mother ingrained this into us as we were growing up. Education is an important element in the struggle for human rights. It's a means to help our people, our children, to rediscover their past, thereby to increase self-respect. Education is our passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And I must have heard that saying 1,000 times. But that's, I always want to emphasize the importance of education. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And anyhow, so if we stand as an example, support organization and people that are trying to do things, then hopefully we will get there.
You know, I'm gonna throw one other thought in that you made me think about, and this is something I want to say, Pastor, about the church. You all remember that I was a councilman for 12 years, and I ran for mayor. White folks got beat up on me back then, 99. And I went down to Atlanta with Dick Gregory. And the idea was that I was gonna, at the time, work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Martin King. The third was a good friend of mine. I had Marty come up here before he met back in 97, 98. And I remember talking to the pastor who was the executive director of Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta. And I was looking at my wounds, you know, and I said, man, this has been like, this man is probably the roughest year of my life. And he said, you know what, I'm gonna switch hats. I gotta talk to you like a pastor right now, as a minister. So you may look back, maybe it's the best year of life, you know, because of we all have different callings, you know. But one thing he said to me was that throughout the history of the black movement, the black church and ministers have always been the leaders, at least in the past. You go back to not only Dr. King, you go back to Nat Turner, you go back to all leaders going back to slavery on up. The black church, and particularly black men in the church, were the leaders of the movement. In the early 70s, as we got more, we got advanced more in terms of politics and voting, we passed the Voting Rights Act and all that. A lot of our young people started going into electoral politics, more so than into ministry, right? Some of that is good, but in some aspects, there's a downside to that. And this is what he said to me. I forget he said this. He said, look, as a minister, you look at the Bible, it's the art of challenge, right? Challenging the system, whether it be Moses, whether it be Paul, okay? Confrontation, that's what he said. It is the art of confrontation. But politics is the art of what? Compromise. So you begin to get a whole generation of black leaders and black men whose mindset is all about compromise. And sometimes we need compromise, but the problem has been that they have gone so far into compromise and really looking out for themselves. That is why I really believe that it's so important that we get the black church and black men in the church back at the forefront of the struggle.
And I want to add to that, and I think we looked before, we saw churches were more involved in the community. Now they're trying to take God out of everything, out of our schools, saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And, you know, it breaks my heart because I'm a deacon at my church and we have missionaries. Our church, we do so much in the community and around the world, you know, and I'm so grateful just for our pastor and all the work we do. And we had a missionary come in and she said, we went to a place in England that they weren't teaching the Bible. And for generations, it was just dwindling, one church in the area. And she came and said that they called for help because that area was one generation away from not knowing God.
Almost like that now.
I don't know why we have to send missionaries around the world when we need missionaries here in Baltimore City. We need missionaries here in Baltimore County. And what I believe is why they take God out of everything, where they're trying to, because when you take hope from somebody, you can control them. But you can't control somebody that has hope.
No. Can I just say one thing? You are dropping some knowledge here. And I don't want to welcome you to the Republican Party just yet, but I will say the knowledge you were dropping, if you look in this room, there are a lot of people here that are independents and Republicans, because I think a lot of us saw what you saw when we look back in history. I think when you were in office, like you said, we had a lot of black leaders that we could all look to, especially in the 80s, the 70s, and the 80s. And then it got to a point, and it's crazy that this is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. If you look at his speech from Knock at Midnight, I think it got to a point where black people understood the game and are now using black people that are living in underserved communities to line their own pockets. And we see that, and this is what I see in the Democrat Party in Baltimore City, and that's why I have a problem with one-party mob rule in the city. I'm not saying all Democrats are bad. What I'm saying is I see Democrats taking advantage of black people and blaming white racists. When I don't see that, I do see white liberals kind of compiling on to what those people are doing in office, but I don't see the racism that we once saw in the 70s and 80s. I don't see it today. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I see a lot of black people in powerful positions taking advantage of black people living in poverty.
I agree.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, I'll say one thing on that. I think you got a point. I think that racism comes in different forms. It's kind of what Malcolm X was talking about. He was talking about the wolf and the fox. Now, and I will say this, Donald Trump made a comment yesterday about the fact that COVID vaccines are mainly going to people of color and white people being forgotten. And so he has made comments that are very, they're racist. Let's keep it real. Now, on the other hand, the problem I have with the Democratic Party is that it's a cobbling together of different interest groups. That's basically what it is, okay? The smallest groups have the most power. The biggest group has the least power. Okay? When we think about democracy, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I think the white women, feminists, LGBTQ activists have a lot of power.
All Democrats.
They basically run everything,
Right.
right?
All Democrats.
All Democrats. But black people represent
Exactly.
about a third of the Democratic Party nationally.
But they vote 90% Democrat almost every election.
Brainwashed.
Okay, so then if you get down to Maryland is about the same, because we're the biggest chunk in the state of Maryland. Of course, Baltimore is way higher. Democrats outnumber 91 and Baltimore's make. Okay, here's the problem. So, even though we are the majority within the Democratic Party, or we're the most loyal, we don't get anything out of it.
Nothing.
So then the question becomes, why keep being loyal to that?
Well, we make
Okay,
this
so-
about politics.
So I'm gonna say one thing about it. So-
Questions after.
So I'm gonna take it, so here's where we are. Okay, so now we have right now, what's the total now? It's like almost 500 million is a part of the COVID relief money.
647. So
640, okay, 640, okay, so, it's the part of Build Back Better, it's, COVID relief, I can't remember the title, okay, now, here we have all these black people in Baltimore City, living in places where they're knocking down houses like crazy, okay? no plan to rebuild the house. We could take this money right now and rebuild the whole city. We got the money, and we've never had this before in our lifetime. It's like when Roosevelt during the Depression put money in, okay? You got Negro mayor, I'm being facetious here. Negro president of council, Negro comptroller, everything black. But why is that not making a difference? I mean, no matter how much money comes in, it's not making any difference. Why aren't we building? I'm gonna say one more thing on this. You know, I was Atlanta because Maynard Jackson was like my hero. You know, when I was president of city council here, and I said, Atlanta's a place to be. You know, here's a man who very fair-skinned guy too, almost looked like a big man. Okay, black man. He was elected in the late 70s and 80s. He did something that was like revolutionary. He said, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna rebuild our airport. We're gonna be the top airport in the whole country, and we're gonna do it all with black people. They hated him. And it was in Georgia. Okay, you're talking about Georgia. And white folks hated his guts. When he stuck to his guns, he created all these black millionaires, black companies, not only in terms of construction, but it filtered down to restaurants and people, all kinds of little businesses, okay? Because the fastest way, we need money. That's what we need. We need business. The fastest way to pump resources into the black community is with large-scale development projects.
Yes,
We could do that here. Yeah.
we can.
You know, right now, I'm gonna stop talking politics. I'm not canning. But okay, I had this dream that we got the Civic Center, the arena downtown, right? It's falling apart. Everybody says that. This opportunity to pump money in our community, create black businesses, get these guys off the street. What you read about it in the paper, what are they gonna do with it? They got some group coming in. And this is part of dishonesty. This group, and they say the group is connected with, or they got association with the basketball player. Which one? You heard about this? Yeah. Who was it? Has Kevin done that? No, not Kevin.
Carmelo.
No, not Carmelo.
Magic Johnson.
No, but here's the point.
Muggsy Bogues, I don't know. Right, just say on the list. Larry Bird, Isaiah Thomas.
Like last year,
LeBron James?
no, not LeBron. Anyway, we'll come back. But here's the point. He has himself now. He doesn't own it, but he's associated. What does that really mean? They're lying to us, okay? They're lying to us.
No, we
And he's going, he's got an afro. I'm talking about the man, he's got a big afro, okay?
That don't make you
Black,
black.
you know, you talk about equity.
Right.
But he's not doing anything for
He's
black
lying
people.
to us.
The head of the law department, the most important appointment that you make as mayor is the city solicitor. Y'all remember how hard I was on Kurt Smoke, right? I used to be really hard. I was Mr. Militant. Kurt Smoke could never have gotten away with putting an old white man as the head of the law department. From not Piper, from Venable Beige and Howard is the biggest, most establishment law firm in the state. Jim Say is the head of that. He's now the head of the law department. Under a black man that walks around with an afro. See, these are the kind of things I'm saying that happen. But again, and I'll end with this. This is why I really believe that's important that the church get involved with this. Because we're not holding our leaders accountable. And as you said too, it's very true, the Democrats are exploiting us.
Yes.
They get elected again and again, but they're not empowering our people.
So at this point, we're gonna take a couple of questions from the audience. I know, did you have a question? Did you have a question earlier?
You have a question for me to answer?
Oh, no. I thought you had one that you wanted to ask. I think.
My name is Roosevelt, by the way. I'm an inner city person. I grew up around this neighborhood. And I'm telling Chief Pastor earlier, and I was telling him like the church is a cornerstone of the neighborhood. I come here, I get a lot of help. And in return, you know, I did the street thing, I did the jail thing. I'm grown now. Like, I really died because that didn't mean anything. Nothing at the end of the day. Right? Today, I'm willing to die for a cause, not because, right? And I'm here tonight, right? I know the agenda, I know the format, I know all that, right? But here's where I'm at. I need some good orderly directions. That's what I'm saying. I need for someone with experience and the knowledge to point me in the right direction, right? And follow us to T. Because I want Baltimore to be the city that it was meant to be.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
I'm tired of the killing. I'm tired of all of that,
Yes.
right? And it's like being of the subculture at one point. I still affiliate with the guys, see how they doing from time to time. Not saying that I'm the one or anything like that, but the respect that I had for myself, the same respect that the street had for me, and I could be real influential in this city. That's what I'm willing to do for my city.
Well, you're in the right place. You're in the church that is helping you. You trust people here. They must trust you. So you have the direction. And sometimes the hardest things to see are things that are right in front of us.
And that's right, and also to add to that, don't let your past, maybe your family did, or you did, dictate on who you're gonna be and where you're gonna go. Because even though my father made mistakes, I was scared. I was starting going to church, man, the pastor was working on me at first. Before he even asked to get involved, I was like, Pastor, I was like, I'm not saying you suck, but you killing it this week. And what I didn't realize that he was always killing it, but the Lord was working in my heart. The more time I spent reading the Bible, even though I didn't understand it, the more time I spent in the Bible, the more time I spent serving, the more the Lord worked in me. And I believe, like you said, you come into church, you're out maybe helping with street, helping this. And I think the more that little that you do, that God will bless you with more opportunities to do even more. So stay faithful in the little. And the more that you stay little, don't never give up, lose hope, but don't never let your past dictate where you're gonna go. Just use that to motivate you. And sometimes I use things that happened to me and my family in the past, sleeping with roaches and rats and things like that. That motivated me through college when I had to eat trash out of a trash can, because I knew I wasn't gonna go back to that. I know when I have kids, I'm gonna make sure my kids don't do that. So to circle back around, just know that God is using you. You are here. Let's let him work through you. And I realized the Lord's working through me. This is not me here. I shouldn't be here tonight, but it's the Lord working through me.
Yes, is it, if at all, I appreciate very much Brother Marcus. He has literally driven me out here, because I want to tell you now, I've been preaching for 50 years. I have been in every organization that you all can imagine. I've been in Build, IMA, Baptist Conference. I was a member of COGIC. I've just been everywhere. And I'm sick of it. And I'm gonna tell y'all, I cannot be transparent with you for just a second. I'm sick of it. Let me tell you what I'm sick of. I'm sick of individuals from the top trying to dictate how to get messages to those at the bottom without ever talking to the bottom. I'm here to tell you now, as one who has been in this community now for 30 years, that out there in the streets, there is the answer. I will never forget. I will never forget. One of my friends, he is now in the land not made with hands. His name was Pastor Earl D. Gilliard. I remember he and Dante Hickman took me out to the Cheesecake Factory in Columbia and called themselves teaching me about politics. I learned from that session everything that I am now using as fuel to go on. They said to me that in order in order for us to understand the politicians today, and I thank God for Lawrence Bell being here. Yeah, he is. He has more qualification in 1/16 of his finger than any one of those who are downtown at City Hall right now. And let me tell you why. And I'm not bashing no one. I'm not bashing anyone, because Republicans are as worse as Democrats, and Democrats are as worse as Republicans. And let me tell you why. Because we live in capitalistic America. In case you need some smelling salt, let me inform you that the color is not black and white, it's called green. See, you gotta understand that green is the entity that runs this country. And everyone who smiles, who are acting like they are concerned about your issue, that your issue will end when the money starts. Now, listen, I mean that. I came here under the empowerment zone. I've had multiple conversations with Kurt Smoke. In fact, he was one of those who installed me as pastor of this church. I was here during the empowerment zone era, only to see the money that was supposed to have come to this area go down to the inner harbor. And Lawrence Bell, he knows well what I'm talking about. And just listening to him, I now have a desire to know the makeup between cocaine and crack. Thank you. I am thankful to the judge, because after night, y'all need to hear me, after the night, I'm going to turn into a vegetarian. But
believe it's a trust issue that has been on the street. As I'm a young man, I watched my homeboy get killed right across the street.
Sorry.
I sold drugs right across the street. Y'all want something from us, but y'all can't give us the trust and the word that y'all have. You can say one thing, right? But being hands-on in the field with it is totally different from the media and just taking a picture with one of them and say, we need this, we need this, we need this. Our youth, right?
You're right,
It's going to take on the loyalty and the trust. We can't believe nobody. We was told actions speak louder than words. And the guidance that we had from our grandfather, grandmother, don't leave up the porch. Because being housed by Dr. We didn't understand that. And it was shocking because we look for a father figure, and our father's not there, so we go to the streets. And we want a hand. So it's just like, it's like a dove. You wrap the chain around him and you tell him, and you show him what to do. You get to earn your trust, and you see that you love him.
And so that is why we're here, because we want to make sure that first, the family gets structured, and the family gets what they need, father, and the order that it is, father, mother, and children, to make sure that when they go out, they're more prepared for the world, before we can get to politics. So I want to bring it back from politics a little bit, and ask anyone in the audience if they have a question relating to family structure, guidance.
If I could add one thing to what you just said, but I want to add one thing, is that I think it's time in the area that we be honest with our kids. You know, I lived in different states. I lived in Kansas City for a while, in Detroit, and there's one thing about Baltimore. We smell the BS a mile away, and the children do. So it's just time to be honest and upfront with our children and be real with them. That's what they need, and that's what they're yearning for right now.
right, if you're interested in bringing family structure to this community, we're right at the corner of Sandtown, Winchester. I am not like my political leaders. I live in 17 and I pastor in 15. I know this like the back of my hand. I know every they're so transient now, but I know every drug dealer in this community. I am familiar with them. I talk to them. That's why when this young man started speaking, I didn't say a word, because he's speaking from a perspective that I know our leaders need to hear. If you want to bring family structure to this community, ask them, and they'll tell you. You've got to understand that the product in which we are experiencing now is nothing more but decades of demasculization of the black man.
And it's a fight, it's a struggle, because we see it. Even as women, we see it. A lot of us, we don't support it for whatever reasons, because we have more benefits on that side, but we see the effemination of black men, and how do you stop it?
Oh, it's okay. Okay, go ahead.
But you know the absence, if you know the absence of, but if you know the absence of, that's the beginning, a presence, a body that is physically there. So if your father was not there, you have to make the option and the choice to be the man who is there. You have to stop. You stop it by doing it. You do the opposite. Your father left, you don't leave, you stay.
You know, there's a, I come to still an example of that. I remember some years ago, when I was barbecue president council, I represented this area, right? There was a year where there were a lot of incidents that happened up at Douglas High School. Right? There was shootings and this and that. They were on the news all the time, you know. And actually, my cousin became the principal for a while. So he came there to get everything together. But we had this group called For Men Only, and what we did was we met with the 9th graders in the morning and the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in the afternoon. The dropout rate is so bad that you have as many 9th graders as you got 10th, 11th, 12th combined. And we would have these discussions, like me, it was a few brothers who've been incarcerated, some brothers with the Nation of Islam, different people, okay, talking. And I thought it was really interesting because as we talked, they talked. And every occasion you had one brother go and say, you know, man, you gotta understand that a lot of us come from single parent households. And we started laughing, like, look, man, look, if you're smart enough to talk like that, you're smart enough to know what to do, okay? You're using that, you're using that, all right? You're using that, all right? So don't come on that, okay? That's the issue we gotta address, but don't just talk that, okay? But here's the good thing about it. All the guys that did the most talking, and I said this to the brothers back, I said, you know what? They're the real leaders, you know that? Even when they're arguing with us, okay? Because we're not gonna change things overnight, but our job as black men is to plant seeds. Even when they're arguing with us, even when they're fighting with us, we at least have planted the seed, and at some point, it's like going to church early on, Pastor, you may deviate, but you got a seed, at some point you say, you know what, that ain't right. I know everybody. I'm doing it, but I know everybody. Okay, because you got the seed. The problem now is you got generations that have not been in the church, who don't always have that moral base, foundation, right. And another thing I noticed was that when we finished the talk, the guys that had the most mouth were always the guys that came in the back and wanted to talk some more. Because they were fascinated by the fact that you had black men that were even interested in more. They argued because they just want to keep the conversation going. And I kept saying, either we pull them in, they very articulate, they got a lot of mouth, they're probably the real leaders. Or you know where they're gonna go next. They're gonna be leaders out there on the street. Right. So I think that's very important. I think another thing I want to mention too, about we gotta develop trust, because I think one of the problems, you know, we try to encourage young brothers who've been out on the street hustling to take those business skills into a legitimate business, right?
That's right.
Okay, they know how to get the drugs, the heroin, or whatever, how to cut it up, how much to cut it up, not to dilute it too much. how to distribute it, distribution.
Without knowing mathematics.
Right. But and here's the thing, formal mathematics, because they use mathematics, okay? So they learn they have all these business principles. But I think one of the reasons why they have a hard time taking that over into a legitimate business is because we're burning each other so much.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you people talk about, well, I'm street, yeah, I'm from the street. Usually what that means is that I'm in a culture of knowing how to get over on that person, that person, that person. And most of us, we burn in our own families. We burn in our own friends. So when it comes time to try to get into a legitimate business, there's no network of support because we don't have any trust among each other. So I'm thinking that's one of the things we need to have a conversation and start talking about. And another thing too, just one more thing on that in terms of masculinity. That's something I used to say in the prisons. You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. You know, I've said this. I've been in Jessup. I've been downtown. I said, you know what? Some of y'all supposed to be so bad. You so bad. You know, I'm not impressed by that.
Right.
Because you're only bad in shooting that brother over there. You're not gonna be that with no white man. You know that? I'm gonna tell you who's really bad. That man down there that can hit a button and your head will pop off. Negro, okay? That's real power.
Right.
What you're dealing with is something totally different, and you're gonna have to change your view of life, because otherwise we will continue to be at the bottom of the pit, looked down by every other race, every other ethnic group.
We have one more question.
No, I don't really have a question.
We need questions.
Wait a minute.
I got a question. I have a question.
He has a question.
Wait.
My question is, I come from Mountain Park, right? For 4 years, got plans still, you retired, and they passed on. That's what we. My question is, my father and mother used to always tell me about how the welfare system used to come in. And I think that was our part of our downfall was put the man on flatten out the house. In order for black sisters to get welfare. You see what I'm saying? That was demoralizing to a community. And we don't talk about that.
Yeah,
I wasn't here. I probably wasn't
yeah,
here.
he talked about it a lot.
I'm sorry, but yeah, man, and
Yeah.
I'll put my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Ladies first.
I have a question for any one of you, and I think I heard Lawrence Bell and maybe the judge and you, Darren Badillo, talk about the church, and certainly you, Pastor. So my question is, what is the church teaching? Is the church teaching morals and character development, or are the churches teaching social justice? Because I'm trying to find out why, I want to understand why. I can't remember which one of you said it, but you said that there are a lot of men, our men, black men, who are not in church. So why are they not in church? What is the church teaching? I'm asking this, is the church part of the complicit? Let me say it that way, complicit.
I would like to speak on that.
Go ahead.
So I think first, what the church should be doing is teaching the Bible.
Amen.
And the word. That's what the church, that's what our pastor does. When I was looking for churches, I wanted to hear a pastor that taught me the word, because I needed to hear the word and let the word work in me. I didn't want to hear somebody's opinion, today in the news, but listen, I wanted to hear the word. So I think most importantly, I can only speak from the experience of me actually being in the church and growing in there and becoming a deacon, is a church is supposed to teach the word and then provide resources for the community. The money that you take in, you're supposed to give it back. And if you have excess, it's supposed to help those around the world. That's what a real church is supposed to do. If they can, but some churches just don't have that support coming in. So the churches, and I can just speak for my experience, but that the churches are not, I don't believe, supposed to share their opinions, because you can throw people off that want to hear just God's word. And that's what we're supposed to hear, is God's word, so it can work in us. Because a lot of times when I read the Bible, sometimes even now, I don't understand what it means. But there's certain pastors and people that have certain spiritual gifts that can break it down for you and help you understand.
I think that both.
Yeah.
I think that, and this is one of the problems with the Democratic Party, by the way, is that if you go back to the 60s on back, the church was a major power within the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was really led by the church, Dr. King and others. I think that a lot of the moral fiber is gone, and because the church is no longer as strong within the party, it's reverberated. And see, the church did what you said. Okay, talk about the moral character. Dr. King was always talking about morals. His basis for supporting civil rights, he always made a moral argument. His arguments were all based upon scripture and morals. And that was very potent. And so I think that as we've lost that, and again, my issue with the church, and I've been honest about this, is I think the church should be the leader. Right. The church should hold people accountable. You know, in Atlanta, one of the things that I know that Dick Gregory and others told me was that, you know, after Maynard left, you had Andrew Young, okay, and you had some others who came along. There was a time in Atlanta where, you know, if the mayor, whoever was it, the lead, was doing something wrong, the preachers, I used to go to meetings, Concerned Black Clergy of Greater Atlanta, we meet on Mondays, all right? They would call the black leadership in. I know a time when, going back, I'm talking about the 90s, Reverend Dobson, then Union Baptist, some of y'all remember him. He would call me to City Hall and say, hey, Lawrence, I don't like this, get over here right now. And I had to kind of respect when he would do that. Yeah, he would do that. Prime Mitchell would do that sometimes. What's going on? I feel sick. Blah, blah, blah. But because I had so much respect for Reverend Dobson and the church, I would drop what I was doing to go over there. You see, that's the kind of leadership, strong male leadership too, that we need to have coming out of the church.
So we want to make sure that we have takeaways from this conversation as well. We know the problems. I think we've all seen all the problems that we have. We know those at this point. What can we do to move forward? I'm going to ask the panel 2 minutes each, and then we're going to try to.
Can I show something before you go there? If you don't mind.
And I got a question. Been had my hand up.
I had my hand up for the longest time. This is what I want to share. Everything that's going on in Baltimore City, my goal is to come in with the solution so we can change it. Go ahead, bro. I do not like going all around like this. I don't. I will walk out on you. Now, Lawrence Bell, why did you tell that story? Because I was back there then when we used to take the cocaine and cook it up. I'm like, he going back. And that because I lived that lifestyle. I'm coming up on 29 years clean. I've been on him for 29 years because this is what we always came at, to have our NA meetings. But what I'm trying to get to is, every issue that we see that's going on in Baltimore City, if the daggone politicians is not doing it, then we need to do it. And that's what I do. I have a house. I have homeless people in. The whole goal is, and when they come in, I tell them, I say, you got to sign up for my mental health program. Because I know it starts within here. So we need to work on in here. We got people that have been raped, molested, abandoned, and all of this. I don't even know who my father is. I was listening to you. I'll be 60 next month. And my whole goal was to be a better man to my children than he was to me.
That's all you can.
I did foster care in this process. I did mentoring in this process. I've been in prisons, Lawrence, like you was talking about. I would always call it a ministry, but it was the H&I. I would go in there, encourage our men, when you come home, get involved in your kids' lives. Sometimes you might not have the money, and it's not about the money, because I got kids. So the whole thing is that emptiness that I feel inside, because of that, what I do, I try to grab you and hug you spiritually. She moved away from me. But Joyce, my baby. But I come in with the solution, and I'm gonna tell y'all right now, they don't like it. And if they see me coming, they'll lock the doors. I joke about that. But I come in with the solution. Her and I, we fought for the eye in the sky. Now let me tell you why I fought for the eye in the sky. Because number one, I lived that life. And my thing is, you gotta give them something to think about before they do it. So that was the reason for the eye in the sky. And I'm gonna try not to be too long, because I walk basically by myself. And I'm trying to find people like-minded, Lawrence, and their heart and mind is for helping our inner city people. I got a phone call a day about a woman with 4 kids. Once I leave this, I'm going to reach out to the people that I know that can help. That's why not being smart, Kim, but that's why a lot of people, as far as up here, don't want to bother, mess with me. I want to rehab houses, and I believe God will do it. You mentioned his name, Pastor Hathaway. My whole goal with Pastor Hathaway, because I know he's supposed to be working on the McCullough homes, turn them down. But my goal is to get contracts off of them for black men, for the black people. Go ahead, Lord.
She told me raise it.
Okay, we got to have an agenda. That's one thing that our people do not have. Agenda. Agenda simply means, what do you want?
Right.
The unions have a list of things that they want. The environmentalists have a list of things they want. The gay activists have a list of things that they want. Everybody has a list of things that they want, except for us. And this is the weakness of black leadership. Okay, that's number one. We should be able to say, okay, this is a golden opportunity. We got brothers out here that can deal with contractors who need to get the I can't remember the program is now with the cars, but we've got to collectively come together and say, this is how we can transform the city. If we do this collectively, we get Minister Alliance, Baptist Ministers Conference, all together, and we go on air and say, City Hall, do this or else.
Right, that's right.
Now, there's another question I want to ask, though, and this is something we got to ask ourselves, okay? I have been, I was like Mr. Militant. I've been on radio. I done fought with all the folks, the white folks, the conservatives about, they said, we don't want welfare. And I said, we need people money and we need for the least of these, okay? But there's a question we got to be honest about. Today, there's so many jobs that are out here right now, right? I mean, let's keep it real, okay? The unemployment rate is down. You've got McDonald's and as a matter of fact, McDonald's is paying people $100 just to fill out an application. You got Burger Kings in some places they give people a $1,000 signing bonus, right? So now, with the number of jobs we do have, why aren't we able to plug people into these positions? If the average person that's selling crack out there is really making barely minimum wage, they're not making much money. Despite the hip hop, all that crap on hip hop, the big side, the vast majority of guys are making nothing. Why aren't we able to take advantage of all these jobs that are out here now?
Right, and they're not gonna do it.
They don't have.
I mean, listen.
They don't have IDs and social security cards.
And you said trade, and that's the issue. We need more trade schools here in the city and in the county. We know 41% of the kids get a 1% GPA. So if we know these kids are gonna educate, we need to help them with employment.
Yeah, so thank everyone for coming, especially thank our panel. I know you all scheduled. Let's give them a round of applause. Coming from West Baltimore, I know all importance about family structure, so that's one of the reasons why, I started this 501c3. It's so important to me.
Go ahead, let it out. Release it.
Get back in here, Marcus. Get him back in here. Like James Brown, get back in here.
I just said a rich one, but no, seriously though, it's important. It's important. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate, especially the brother right there. Me and him was talking. We're gonna really do some work, get the other brothers in here and stuff like that. But thank you for the panel, y'all coming. I appreciate y'all coming.
And thank you, Mark. Oh, can I just say this?
Can I have a solution?
Particularly for those of us